Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Okay, it looks like you're in a refrigerator or something.
I'm in a secure, undisclosed location.
Okay, if that's your
That's
idea
all
of
you need
secure.
to know. We're going on a need-to-know basis here, Mickey, and that's all you need to know.
Okay. Well, you don't know where I am either.
No, but I want to compliment you on those curtains. Those are nice.
They're very pretty. Took me a long time to pick them out. Today is the day I would get COVID if I got COVID at this weird. I went to an event that was filled with liberals in Los Angeles, and nobody was wearing a mask. It was bizarre. It was a great event, but it was just odd.
How do you account for that?
It was put together by mature people who have a realistic view of life and think they got to take chances or something. It could be this very fashionable theory, which I am resisting, which is if you're vaccinated, it's good to get COVID because that will just give you greater immunity. You're not going to die. You'll recover. And then you'll be better than before because you'll have the vax and the COVID immunity, the natural COVID immunity.
There's an actual study showing as much. I don't know if it's reliable, but there was such a finding.
In preparation for this, I reviewed some of the stuff about the potential brain effects of COVID, even if you recover, even if you don't go into the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And it's alarming enough that if you value your brain, you don't want to get COVID.
Like how alarming? I mean, did they have like percentages?
No, nothing like that. It's like
so. It's all anecdotal.
No, there was a study. I just didn't get to the part where they showed percentages.
Oh, I see. You need to get to that part, I think, before you get alarmed.
Okay, well, next week I'll have the percentages, but I might also have COVID. So I can provide a link to the study.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's how is this COVID thing going? Do you have a sense? One weird thing is how much higher our death rate is relative to Britain's experience with Delta. You know, like the ratio of death per capita to caseload per capita is much higher here than in Britain.
Well, is it higher than the relative ratio? We're more unvaccinated, so
that
think
could
that would give
be
us a higher death rate.
Could be it. I mean, somewhat. It's not a super dramatic difference, but that could be it. It could also be that this is a tribute to socialized medicine, and we have more people who get bad medical care. I don't know.
Or we could be more obese.
We could be that.
Having taken trips to the American heartland, Bob, we're not in that good shape.
Mickey, I am from the American heartland. You know what I figured out only 2 years ago at a family reunion? That I was not only I did the math. I asked my older sister some questions about when we moved where, and I did the math, and I realized I was not only born in Oklahoma, I was conceived in Kansas. Okay, it doesn't get more Middle American than that.
I think
That's
you're not allowed to.
Far cry from Beverly Hills.
You're not allowed to run for president because you are from two states just by yourself. Maybe I don't know what. Or maybe you don't have to have a vice president because you already represent several states. It's like this friend of mine from. Do you have this experience at family reunions? This friend of mine from Southie in Boston, Irish American neighborhood that portrayed in that Matt Damon movie about the guy who's a genius, works as a janitor at MIT.
I haven't seen it, but go ahead.
It's a famous movie. He misses the sixth game of the World Series because he's bonding with Robin Williams. You must have seen it.
It's not Good Will Hunting, right? It's
Good Will Hunting.
It's Good Will Hunting. Okay, haven't seen it.
There's a sign of brain deterioration right there. Anyway, he went back to that neighborhood and he went to his family reunion and he was greeted by an old friend from across the street. You didn't get fat. Okay. He was the only guy in his family who hadn't gotten fat, in the neighborhood who hadn't gotten fat. Is that the case with you?
well, these are immediate family reunions. And when I am at one of these family reunions, all of my energy is focused on not uttering the word Trump, because the place will blow if that happens. As you know, 3 of my 4 siblings voted for Trump, and many of their offspring.
Some of us has the reverse problem, Bob.
Well, you're on the reverse side of the same problem. You are the problem in your family. Not to view this from a particular tribal perspective, but you are the problem in your family, and in my family is the problem.
Yeah, it's just a majority minority thing. Not making any judgments. The second thing. So there's this crazy theory, which I gather you don't take as that crazy, that it's not that we shouldn't worry about getting COVID, because getting COVID, unless you're going to die, is actually not that bad.
I don't know. It can be bad. I know if people have long COVID, it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's bad. Okay. It's fatigue. It's like,
and I seem especially susceptible to these long-term, not crippling, but sort of chronic fatigue type things. Like after I got mono, it changed my whole symptomology. I never really recovered. And this is just going to be another one, so.
But are you sure that's not all in your head, like the mono thing? Because you have to admit, you're the kind of person in whose head it would all be.
Well, I think it's all allergies, and I think having mono changes the way your body reacts to allergies.
I was thinking more of hypochondria.
If you remember, Bob, I once asked this of Dr. Fauci, before he was famous, and he said he was head of all allergy research in the United States, and he said, Mickey, we don't know that much about allergies. So well, I take it the answer is we don't know. But if you talk to an allergist, they will tell you that having mono makes a big change in people.
Okay.
Everybody has mono now, so it doesn't, you can't distinguish, but.
Okay.
That could be.
So is there more on COVID? The death rate is rising like rapidly. That's the other thing another way to put this is what I just said is if you look at the curves, ours compared to Britain's, and both are per capita curves, our caseload curve never rose as sharply as theirs rose, but I think our death rate curve is rising more sharply than theirs ever rose.
There is more, which is first Florida's. Was it last week? I thought Florida's death rate was mysteriously going down. It turns out that they've changed their method of reporting, so they don't report the cases as they come in. They assign the date of the infection, of the death. So they go back and they add it to that day's totals, which means there'll always be a lag. It'll always seem to be going down because there's a reporting lag. The most recent ones, the reports won't have come in yet. And I had held out hope that even if you corrected for that, the death rate would not increase. Since, for various reasons, people are being hospitalized for on lesser grounds than before. More people were vaccinated, so the death rate wouldn't rise commensurate. But it's since risen, so it's clearly it's rising in Florida too. My theories were wrong. The other issue is variants, and there was an interesting quote in a story linked by Drudge that seemed to confirm what I had thought, which is that yes, there are more variants if more people are vaccinated, but if fewer people are vaccinated, the variants don't have pressure to target the vaccine.
Wait, there are fewer variants if more people are vaccinated, right?
Right. There are fewer number of variants, but
and what's the second part?
Sorry?
And what's the second part? But
the variants that happen, I'm going to go to this quote now, so I'm not going to be able to see you, but more likely to target the vaccine, so you're more likely to get a variant. The more vaccines you get, the more likely you are to get a variant that targets the vaccine and can evade the vaccine. So it's not completely clear that vaccination is, it seems to me it's an empirical question, but I don't think we know the answer to whether having vaccines is a way, vaccinating people is a way to stop variants. People should get vaccinated so they don't die, but
well, well, I mean, you're right. The first part's right. Vaccination is a way to reduce the number of variants. Does vaccination, on the other hand, make it more likely that one of the variants will be vaccine resistant? I think it has to, but I just think that's not the end of the story. And, you know, if you compare that to the situation where nobody is vaccinated, I think you're much better off with people getting vaccinated. But
well, here's the quote from a Dr. Wall. It's in a story in the one of the Carolina papers. He says, given that so many, this is a paraphrase, and then there's a quote, given that so many remain unvaccinated, there hasn't been an evolutionary need for a variant to evolve that's able to cause severe illness in those vaccinated, Wall said. You really need pressure to be applied to a virus in order to see it mutate. End quote.
That's not true. That's not true. You do not listen to anything else this guy says. Do not listen to anything else this guy says. I just don't think it's the case that vaccine, any kind of environmental pressure in this situation is going to increase the rate of mutation. That's what he just said. He used the word mutate. That's not what we're talking about. What is it? Say, read that quote again.
He did say to see it mutate. I think he meant to see it mutate.
That doesn't look
in a bad way.
Let's change the subject. This guy is not worth spending any more time on. I'm sorry. The rate of mutation is decreased by vaccination because there's less virus around, and you know the mutation rate is a function of the number of times the virus is replicating, and the less virus, the less replication.
Well, forget this guy, but the general theory that
don't just forget him. Give me his name so I can write him down and like dox him or something. This guy should be completely removed from our dialogue. What's his name?
His name is Wohl, W-O-H-L, and Dr. David Wohl, infectious disease specialist at UNC Chapel Hill.
Specialists. What are the generalists like at Chapel Hill? That's what I'd like to know.
They may be misquoting him, but Bob, forget Dr. Wohl, but is the principle that if everybody was vaccinated, the mutations would then select the ones that triumphed would be the ones that can get around the vaccine. That principle seems solid, right?
Well, if they triumphed, by definition, they would be triumphing in the environment they're in. And if that were an environment where everyone was vaccinated, yes, they would be doing pretty well. I mean, as I said,
there you go.
Yeah, I conceded that point. I mean,
okay, I thought you did. That's why I was worried that you were taking it back. But there's all kinds
of subsidiary questions, like how likely is it that the virus that is doing relatively well spreading among vaccinated people is doing worse than that spreading among unvaccinated people. For example, it's a bunch of complicated questions. I don't know. I haven't gotten to the bottom of it, but we've pondered these before to no great effect.
I thought I'd bring it up because I had this killer quote from Dr. Wohl.
Yeah, well, it's a quote that should be killed forever and ever and ever. Dead.
It also seems to be true that the Lambda virus, which everybody is worried about, is currently being outcompeted by the Delta virus. I don't know what.
Is that right?
Sorry?
Maybe that's good because we at least have some. The vaccine is somewhat effective against Delta. I don't know how effective it is against Lambda, but
it seems to be a matter of degree. But Delta is so much more infectious that it's predominating. So, the ideal would be if a relatively non-lethal but incredibly infectious version predominated, right? And that's the ultimate hope is that it will all be infected, but it'll be by a version that doesn't cause much harm. But that doesn't necessarily happen because, for example, it never happened with smallpox. People were hoping that a less lethal version of smallpox would come to the fore, and it never happened. We had to eliminate smallpox.
So what do you think about this Afghanistan thing?
That's a good transition, Bob.
I think we had to do something to get out of that.
You didn't want me to share my medical expertise anymore?
I just think we keep talking about this, and I don't know any more than I did last time about this very same question about like the effect of the vaccine on, on the evolution of the virus. I mean, there's a couple of things you can say for sure, and then to go from there to, well, does this mean the vaccine is not good, requires you to look into a bunch of questions I don't know the answers to. Like like I said, how likely is something that evolves to thrive amid the vaccine to be something that wouldn't thrive among an unvaccinated? I mean, a good example is Delta. It does do better than its predecessor among the vaccinated, but it does better still among the unvaccinated.
But we're not saying in order for the vaccine to be good, because the vaccine is good in any case. What we're saying, in order to be good at stopping scary mutations.
It can't stop mutation. I mean, if you want to stop mutations, vaccinate as many people as possible.
Scary mutations.
Oh,
being
scary.
Ones that avoid the vaccine.
Well, okay, but again, it's. I mean, strictly speaking, it's not even the scary mutations. It's the thriving of the mutations that, in retrospect, were scary. But you
got me there, Bob.
I just didn't want you to go the way of Dr. Wall. We just single-handedly ruined his career, and I don't want to see you go there.
Okay. Anyway, it sounded like you were saying there was an open question whether people should get vaxxed.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so as a practical matter. I mean, the answers to the questions that I don't know would have to be pretty strange and surprising for me to reach that conclusion. There's no doubt that we would be, with respect to Delta, with respect to everything we've seen so far, we'd be in a much better world. We might not even have a Delta problem if Americans had gotten vaccinated in larger numbers.
Yeah. And there, I would have thought you would go crazy for the WHO versus Biden fight over whether we should vaccinate the world or give ourselves a third dose.
Well, I mean, on ethical grounds, I'd say the WHO is right. What's interesting is it's not even clear that they're not right in terms of American self-interest. I mean, it could well be that from the point of view of long-term American health, it's better to send the vaccines abroad. I mean, that's how complicated this thing is, like, in other words, if you can radically decrease, if you can use 1 million vaccines abroad in a way that radically decreases the rate at which new scary variants are created, in the long run, maybe that's better for America than slightly slowing the spread of Delta with booster vaccines. That's at least possible.
I think WHO makes that claim.
That's a pretty extraordinary claim to make.
The people that comment on the WHO report on NPR make that claim. I think put it that way. The principle I always apply, and maybe it doesn't work in this case, is fix your oxygen mask to yourself before you help the person in the seat next to you. And if Americans think they're being taken care of, they will be more generous and gin up more funding and more production capacity to help the world. And
that's pretty strained. That is a pretty strained excuse for getting Mickey his booster shot, I'll tell you.
No, I said it may not apply to this case. And I'm not looking forward to the third booster shot, because if I have arthritis after the first booster shot, I don't know what's going to happen after the third one. But
the other hip is what's going to happen.
It's already in both hips and one knee and one elbow. So there you go. So, okay, I just wanted to bring that up. A little chance for you to plug for global action.
Well, no, I mean, I've said before, we're totally, the failure in retrospect, I think. I mean, this may be viewed as a watershed failure in the sense that this was clearly something that, even from the point of view of American national self-interest, we should have been thinking about globally, right? but because like all these variants are arising abroad, right? That's a clue that sometimes it's in your interest to expend more resources abroad. And in retrospect, I think we're just going to say, it's kind of stunning. Almost nobody was really thinking about this clearly, even from the point of view of national self-interest, let alone altruism or,
NPR was on the case.
Are they?
They were on the case. So,
but who in the political world? Who among our leaders?
Oh, nobody. It's in nobody's political interest. That's why Biden's not doing it.
Well, actually, if you could make the point persuasively that it's in this is a good transition to Afghanistan. If you can make the case persuasively that it's in America's self-interest to do something, maybe you can win politically.
Well. Here's how I think about Afghanistan, and tell me if I'm crazy. There's sort of three positions. There's the Biden position, which is get out. If we lose quickly, so what? If there's a mess, so what? At least it's not bloody. In other words, right now, there was another weird thing on NPR where they called the doctor of Medicine Without Borders, Doctors Without Borders, who has a clinic in some area. And they clearly expected, we called you 2 weeks ago when the clinic was overrun with casualties from the fighting. Now, doctor, it must be really awful. And the doctor said, no, actually, it's really fine now. We're back to normal. People aren't being killed. The fighting has stopped. Right. We're delivering babies. And so the fighting stopped. The surrendering without a shot produced an incredibly bloodless transition of power, a relatively bloodless transition of power. And that's to the advantage of the Biden way of transitioning. Then there's we should leave, but we should have left better crowd, which is the middle position, which is, why did we have to abandon Bagram Air Base? Couldn't we have gotten the SIVs out more quickly? Why did we pull the contractors who were supporting the Afghan army? At least the Afghan army would have held out for a few more months, maybe in a few more years, and it would look better. And then there's the third position, which seems to be a sort of more powerful opposition. The problem with the middle position is we lose anyway, and in the process, more people are killed. Why is that such a big advantage just to have the face-saving few months before the Taliban take over? Not going to help the long-run women and children in Afghanistan because the Taliban are going to take over anyway. The third one is if we kept 3,500 troops there, we could have held the Taliban at bay indefinitely. And this is the McMaster position, and it was worth it was worth the 3,500 troops. And McMaster says, I just want to finish it. The master said the president and the president before him and the president before him has said it's not. If that's what it takes, it's not worth it. And McMaster claims now we see that it was worth it. Well, I'm not sure we see that it was worth it maintaining the 3,500 troops, but there's not nothing. We wouldn't get nothing for keeping the Afghan government in power.
Well, first of all, I don't think you could have done it for 3,500 troops. I mean, remember, the Taliban had been slowly gaining ground in recent years as we reduced our troops. Secondly, the only reason no American troops had been dying is because part of the Trump deal was that they couldn't kill American troops, and they actually honored that deal. But they only honored it because they believed the withdrawal was coming. That was what they gave us as part of the withdrawal deal. So I don't think it's true that you could have preserved the status quo with this small a number of troops and this small a number of casualties.
It's not like Korea where we're in a standoff and the Koreans aren't shooting at us. So, yeah, we have a big garrison there, but they're not dying.
But I'm not sure I caught that. But
people say, well, we have troops in Korea and they're basically there permanently. And but they're not being shot at.
They're just like, that's just like they're doing. Yeah, no, there's no danger whatsoever. I mean, there's no ongoing threat.
And I guess what McMaster's answer would be, yeah, some of them will be killed, but it'll still be worth it.
Yeah, no, that's a straightforward deterrence troop presence, and it's worked for decades.
Right.
That you leave them there, North Korea doesn't dare attack, and that's that.
Right. No, but in Afghanistan, suppose the Taliban starts shooting at us again, is McMaster would say it's still worth it because, if you listen to the world, it's all, the women aren't going to be able to go to universities and they're going to be oppressed by their husbands. And the Taliban is going to go into Pakistan. And if the Taliban takes over Pakistan has nuclear weapons. There might be a nuclear war with India.
Pakistan has been kind of a de facto ally of the Taliban's. Pakistan does have reason to worry about too much radical Islam, and there is a Pakistani version of the Taliban and so on. But it's like these are so far fetched. The headlines, the various kinds of scare scenarios you're hearing, like, this will empower Russia. Let me give you a headline that was in the New York Times. Like, okay, so with Afghan collapse, Moscow takes charge in Central Asia, and the subhead says that this is, quote, at the expense of the United States. And then you read the piece, and there's not a single example where it clearly hurts actual American interests. It may cut the amount of American influence, but is that always a bad thing? And in fact, there's this quote in this piece from this guy, and I'll read you. This is a paraphrasal of this Dubnov guy, who's a Russian and an expert on the region. Here's the quote. All things being equal, Mr. Dubnov said, Moscow would have been happy for the United States to remain in Afghanistan and for Washington to continue to shoulder the burden of preventing the country from becoming a haven for international terrorist groups. The Kremlin sees the possibility of Islamist extremists and drug traffickers crossing into post-Soviet republics in Central Asia and from there into Russia as a serious threat. And then here's a quote from Dubnov. It was, of course, a great deal for us when the Americans were doing the work of dragging the hotheads out of the fire over there. Now, the point is local powers in that area have an interest in stabilizing Afghanistan and keeping it from being a cauldron that creates, terrorist groups that spew their violence all over the world. China also has such an interest. And yet what you're going to see is, to the extent that Russia and China gain influence in Afghanistan and try to do those things, you're going to see people frame it as if this is some kind of fucking loss in the Cold War, because now China has more influence. And they're going to say, well, this is part of China's plan to overwhelm democracy with authoritarianism because the Taliban is authoritarian. No, it's just China and Russia doing what powers do. And it could well be, on balance, good for us and save us a lot of trouble and a lot of blowback, by the way, because we won't be the occupying forces.
There's a void, Bob. There's a void, and they're filling the void.
Exactly. I'm happy for there to be a void. It wasn't fun being the one who filled that void. And by the way, the Pulse nightclub shooting, second biggest mass shooting in modern American history. He was an Afghan American who said during the shooting, you guys are bombing my country. And he also mentioned Iraq. He mentioned Syria. He mentioned the whole thing, and he mentioned ISIS. But the fact is, the big question we haven't talked about, which is a legitimate question, and I'm sure it's McMaster's big concern, is will this be a platform for like Al-Qaeda? It's a good question, but I just want to point out something I think I said a couple of weeks ago or something. All the only real post 9/11 Islamist terrorist threat to the American homeland that has actually materialized is homegrown terrorism. And they tend to be people who say at least that they have been inspired by America being at war in majority Muslim countries. So given the kind of terrorism we've actually seen in America for the past 2 decades, this should help. Okay.
But you seem to imply a while ago that the cauldron and the fighting in Afghanistan led to terrorism. I don't think that's true. It's the stability that provides the platform for Osama bin Laden to set up shop, or Osama doesn't care if there's a civil war raging. The question is, does the Taliban? So it's not like civil war equals terrorism coming at the United States.
Well, actually,
Taliban takeover can equal terrorism coming to the United States.
Yeah, what do you think brought the Taliban to power? A civil war. And who helped foment the civil war? The United States, by turning Afghanistan into a proxy playground starting in 1979.
Right, but what led to Osama was the Taliban winning, and now they've won again.
Right, but what brought the reason the Taliban could come to power was because of the chaos that we played a very large role in creating.
Well, we'll get to that.
Well, but, let's do it.
I think we're making progress. You mentioned the refugees, and of course now we're going to be taking a lot of more Afghan refugees, like the Pulse nightclub shooter, and we
don't know that. We don't know that,
right? But they're both Afghan refugees, and they're refugees like him. They're not necessarily terrorists like him. And there was a question in the press of whether Biden had delayed the process of taking these people back. This was supposedly part of his bad planning for political reasons, because he didn't want the Trumpists to complain that, oh, you're taking in all these potential terrorists. So he really didn't want to confront that. So these floated down. And the administration has been saying, oh, that's ridiculous. Why would we ever do that? But it's plausible to me, because if you remember, Biden he hasn't until recently fucked around with the disaster at the border. He's let Mayorkas do his thing. But he did try very conservatively to keep down the refugee cap, which is like a different issue, seemingly for political reasons. And then he was rebuffed and he raised it back up again. But he did have that political instinct. So maybe he had the same instinct with Afghanistan. It's entirely plausible to me that slow
walking the refugees.
Slow walk the refugees because he didn't want it to be an issue.
I mean, it's not inconceivable, I suppose. But on the other hand, there's another explanation, which is that he really was kind of in a bind, which was that the Afghan government didn't want him to start doing mass evacuations for a very good reason. I mean, they said, if you start doing mass evacuations, people are going to think the party's over and it's time to panic and the Taliban will take over. Now, we now know that the Taliban had negotiated so many deals that they were going to take over anyway. But that was the actual concern, apparently, with early mass evacuations. And so he was in kind of a tough spot. And I can see that being the explanation for what he did. It's possible that he's playing this very clever political game that you ascribe to him. I got to say, though, I'd be more convinced if he was doing more clever things in general. And he doesn't seem to me to be doing
it. It wouldn't be a clever political game. It would be, oh, my God. It would just be a visceral reaction political game. It'd be, oh, my God, I'm getting killed on the border. I can't give the Republicans one more issue to beat me over the head with. So I just don't want to do this. But the issue you raised is, was there a right, better way to get out? And Trump says he would have a better way, and I don't quite buy his way. But it's, suppose you said, look, we're getting out. Don't fuck with us. We have deterrence. We have a military presence there, and I'm behind our perimeter. We're going to take out all our civilians and all our equipment, and eventually all our troops. And this will be the situation afterwards, which is, we will give X amount of aid to the Afghan government, and they will do as well as they can do. And isn't that good for you, Taliban? And so you just do that. The Afghan government wouldn't like that, I guess, is the answer. But what did the Afghan government think was going to happen? Be better than what they have now? Well,
I think it's unclear whether the Afghan government, in retrospect, knew the whole thing was going to happen. I mean, who knew what? A lot of at least regional officials had a clue as to what was going to happen because they were making the deals, I think. But I don't know if this answers your question, but the other side of Biden's calculation here, and another reason to think he wasn't trying to slow walk the refugees is, if there are tens of thousands of people who worked for the American operation, Afghans, and they're still there. And if they all stay there and the Taliban doesn't treat them nicely, and there's certainly a chance of that, that could be a political nightmare for Biden. Because, the MSM seems to me very primed to cast this withdrawal in a negative light. I mean, obviously, it's been kind of a shit show. It's not like they really have to strain, but it does seem to me that, and this is partly the blob at work, and it's partly, a kind of tendency to emote over human tragedy, which is not a horrible instinct. But for whatever reason, it seems to me the MSM is, almost trying to be as alarmist as they can be. And so, Biden, if he's thinking clearly, I would think he doesn't want to leave all these people behind and permit, the media to do an endless stream of stories about these people being imprisoned or killed.
That's a good point. What if the media just focused on that, it wouldn't bother me so much as if you listen especially to the BBC. The great loss of the war is, a TV anchor in Afghanistan went to work and they wouldn't let her get into the building because she's a woman. Okay, it's a bad thing, but it's not worth having a war over. And it reflected the arrogance of one of the things that's supposedly worth the war, which is we're bringing our enlightened Western way of life, which I do think is more enlightened than their way of life, to them at the point of a gun. And isn't this a good thing? And it's good for women, and women go to school. That's just not worth having a war over. I assume you agree with my point as inarticulately as I've made it.
Well, I think if you could at very low cost advance human rights massively in any country, that would be great. But we've been at this for 20 years and it just hasn't gone well. But on the point of the media, how much they're straining, I saw the headline. It was either on the Post or Times today, at least online. It was like, Taliban uses tear gas to dispel demonstration. I'm like, man, that's what we want. Tear gas, not bullets, right?
There were bullets. In Jalalabad, they were firing into the air.
Well, this headline, even firing into the air.
They killed 3 people.
Yeah, but Mickey, look.
I'm just saying it wasn't tear gas.
This is another thing, and this is a criticism of the media. Here, I'm going to say something that probably almost nobody out there remembers, okay? So Egypt decided to have a coup during the Obama administration. The military did. Egypt had gotten to a point arduously where they had an actual functioning democracy, and it was functioning, not perfectly by any means. There was a lot of popular discontent, but there was a parliamentary election coming up. Relief was on the way. The government did not seem to be trying to do some kind of, strong arm move of subverting democracy. Okay, it was a Muslim Brotherhood government. Now, military stages a coup. We know it's coming. We don't try to stop it. Obama never even called it a coup, even though it was like military marches in, takes the president, sends him away. It was a coup. And then some supporters of the president held a demonstration. And you know what happened next?
They were killed.
Yeah. You know how many?
150.
1,000 in one day in one place. Okay. Now, and I just want to say that gets no attention. And that's a case where we're supporting the fucking government that's doing it. We're doing them the favor of not calling this a coup. But Mickey, I just want to say this shit happens all the time. And now we do something where it's not the government we're supporting. We just finally got the hell out of the country. And we're calling it a crisis if 3 people get shot. It's bad if 3 people get shot. But
my point was that 3 people getting shot is a worse harbinger of things to come than just using tear gas.
It could well be.
The example you were using.
It could well be. Things could get much worse. They were much worse the first time around. But the point is, another headline. Okay, this was the front page. Taliban commander says, this is the Washington Post. Lead story. Taliban commander says group will apply Sharia law. Well, duh, it's a fucking Islamist government. Of course. The question is, what do they mean? What is their interpretation of Sharia law going to be? There was no chance they're going to say, we've decided that Sharia law is just not the thing. This Islam thing was fun for a while, but it's just no longer very important to us. Who was doing the homepage for the Washington Post? They're just falling all over them. I have to, speaking of
But I think you've left a big loophole for this kind of thinking when you say if the force is minimal enough and the increase in human rights is great enough, then sure, we can intervene. I think that's
if if it's some kind of sustainable, if it is moving towards some kind of self-sufficiency, it was moving the other direction. The Taliban was still gaining ground last year, the year before.
The argument against that would be that more and more we had like hundreds of thousands of women going to universities, and we are gradually sort of building up a class of people who liked the Western NGO way of life. And the more of them, the harder it is for the Taliban to take over again. And so we were making some progress just on demographic grounds. I don't buy it. I'm just saying there is an argument.
No, progress was being made. This is just, it's just not sustainable. And the whole, I just think this whole business of having American troops everywhere is a bad business to be in. And one of them is that, again, it is implicated in almost all the serious homegrown terrorism we've seen. Now, getting out of one country alone is not going to solve that problem. But, we just have, we ultimately have no, look, we should endlessly apologize for what we've done to Afghanistan. And it starts in 1979 when we just treated them as pieces on a chessboard. And and helped escalate a situation that got well over 1 million of them killed, okay, before 9/11, okay? But at some point, you just got to say, we're just getting out of the whole business of fucking up countries. We helped fuck up Iraq. We helped fuck up Afghanistan. We helped fuck up Syria. We just got to get out.
That was a good rant, and I basically agree with it. But I want to talk about this business about us supporting the Taliban during the Cold War. On your newsletter, you write.
No, I didn't say we supported them. I said we created. Well, I mean, we did. We helped. We paid for the training of Mullah Omar, probably because he was trained by Pakistan's ISI. That's all true. But what I said was, we contributed to the chaos that allowed as extreme a group as the Taliban to take power.
Right. I thought we explicitly gave money to the Taliban. That was
well, various of them. We may have done that too. We definitely subsidized members of the Taliban.
Anyway, you say it's always bad to think of, and I'm exaggerating your argument, to think of countries as pawns at play in the Cold War. Either they're on the side of the people who were against or the side of the people who were for, and Afghanistan was such a pawn that was in play. But you glide over in 3 sentences the fact that we won the Cold War. That was a benefit of aiding the Taliban that has to be included in the calculation. And that's a big fucking benefit.
No, it's not. Because the Soviet Union was absolutely doomed. There was no way we were going to lose the Cold War. There was no way unless we had a nuclear exchange and everybody lost.
Wait, there's no way we could win the Cold War?
The Soviet Union was a decrepit, technologically primitive, economically, hopeless machine. I was there in the early 1990s. It was pathetic. They were doomed to lose. It's possible that the Afghanistan intervention accelerated the date on which the Cold War ended. That's not impossible, but it's not what won the Cold War because the Soviet Union was never going to win.
Well, but if you're in Eastern Europe, a country under the control of the Soviet Union, maybe the date would be pushed back without the Afghanistan humiliation such that all those countries that are now free would not be free now. They would take decades and decades for them to get out from under the failing Soviet Union. And that's a big win. You have to include that on the positive.
And maybe the Yugoslavian Civil War wouldn't have started. There's all kinds of things that happened when the Cold War ended. And there's all kinds of people who are dead because it ended there and all kinds of people who are more free because it ended there.
But you can't, but you can't say it was bad to fight the Cold War and to use Afghanistan to win it unless you take into account all those considerations. And a lot of them are positive, and you don't do that in your piece.
I'm saying it was bad to literally fight it. It was bad to send troops to Vietnam. It was bad to support right-wing murders in Central America. It was all bad, bad, bad. Because if we had had faith in our economic system, we would have just glided through the shit and said, bring it on. And we would have fucking won. And we would have fucking won. And I mean, let them pile up their, quote, assets like Cuba. Those were a drain on the Soviet Union because the economic system that they exported to these countries did not work.
Every we might still be in the process of winning, and that's 40 years of unfreedom for Eastern Europe.
So what?
Okay, well,
I mean, look.
You lived in Czechoslovakia, you might disagree.
Yeah, and if I was a dead Bosnian Muslim, I might agree. I mean, again, all kinds of stuff happened after the Cold War, and it's just, the various counterfactuals you can do are, just highly conjectural at best.
The problem is that you make the Cold War.
Can I just say one more thing? How many dead people in Vietnam? I mean, this is all, add up the whole damn thing before you start, celebrating whoever you want to celebrate on the other end of the calculus.
Not celebrating. I'm just saying I agree with you about Vietnam. I'm just saying your piece did not have the full balance of the positives because we won the Cold War. That's all I'm saying.
No, but remember, my premise is we didn't need to do that shit to win the Cold War.
Okay, that was
Vietnam did not accelerate our winning of the Cold War.
Vietnam didn't. Afghanistan might have.
Maybe.
So I guess the other problem I had is, it seems to me the Cold War paradigm, which you don't like, is better than what's the real paradigm now, which is the war of liberal anti-authoritarianism against authoritarians everywhere, whether they're Russian or communist or not. And that's a much more dangerous ideology. That's George Bushism, basically, or Anne Applebaumism, whatever you want to call it. We are against authoritarianism everywhere, and it's worth taking up arms to fight the authoritarians like the Taliban, even though, like now, they have no bearing on any Cold War that we could care about.
According to the Anne Applebaums, that is the new Cold War, right? We're not fighting communism, we're fighting authoritarianism.
Well, right, but that's a much broader Cold War than just fighting the Soviet Union, and that's why I think it's more dangerous. And so I think you should acknowledge that it's sort of the Cold War is actually not that bad. If we just say we're in a Cold War with China, we're just fighting China, that leads to a lot fewer wars and loss of life than if we say we're fighting authoritarianism everywhere on the planet it exists, including China.
Well, no, wait. I mean, it's actually kind of analogous. During the Cold War, China and Russia were the looming superpowers, and we attributed stuff in all kinds of countries to their malign influence, and often it was their influence, but we just kind of over-dramatized the stakes. And so we saw all of these various countries, Angola, in Central America and Southeast Asia, and we saw all these countries as important proxy battlegrounds that were ultimately extensions of usually Russian or Chinese influence. And now we're doing that again. Now we're saying China and Russia are these two authoritarian superpowers, not communists per se. And again, believe me, yeah.
We're not saying that about Afghanistan. We're saying Afghanistan may not be a pawn of Russia or China, but it's authoritarian, so we should fight it just on its own. There will be some countries that aren't pawns of your adversary in a Cold War who you will fight under the Anne Applebaum, George Bush theory, and you will not fight under Cold War theory. You will not intervene. And so they're not the same.
I'll bet you there will be people trying to frame it in terms. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's
when
ridiculous.
China starts doing business with Afghanistan, trust me, these people, some of them are going to be depicting Afghanistan as an extension of Chinese influence.
But if you read Anne Applebaum's piece, in The Atlantic, she doesn't talk about China or a Cold War. She talks about the war against authoritarianism, and that's how George Bush put it in his second inaugural, which is spreading democracy is in our interest. We will spread democracy everywhere.
Okay, I just predict that that they will be very attentive to the faintest sign that these authoritarian countries are getting assistance of some kind from China or Russia that will allow them to turn it into this giant paradigm.
Well, sure, they'll seek whatever argument they can, but I think you are allergic to the Cold War paradigm because
Absolutely.
You don't want a Cold War with China, so you're tarring it in order to make the current posture against China look worse. And since I'm sort of sympathetic to the new Cold War against China, I would rather not heap opprobrium on the old Cold War paradigm, but focus on the paradigm that's actually in operation now, which is the war against authoritarianism.
Well, I just think the last Cold War was a source of massive delusion, just actually a confused view of the world. And in retrospect, you can point to the things that we were just flat out wrong about, but also to a huge amount of morally indefensible conduct. We just got a ton of people killed and tortured. I mean, that's bad. And the dynamics are the same here in principle, and the same temptations, like the same, like attributing this to that, to this looming superpower and so on. Yeah, I worry. I mean, in many ways it's different. And in some ways, I think the stakes are higher now. It's more important to avoid a Cold War now because there are now more global problems that really, really have to be confronted.
I mean, maybe
amid a Cold War.
Maybe a Cold War against China would limit the amount of suffering and killing, because there'll be countries that will be on our side against China that will be authoritarian, and the Ann Applebaums will say we have to fight them, and the Cold War people will say no, they're on our side, they're okay, and the environmentalists will say no, they're on our side on global warming, they're okay. So we won't have civil wars in those countries. So Cold War is a limiting principle as opposed to the universal, expansive, anti-authoritarian principle. Just throwing that out there.
I mean, it is an interesting question, whether these people will be true to their word and really oppose authoritarianism everywhere they find it. Because remember, the Cold War, there was an explicit justification for doing business with authoritarians because they weren't totalitarians. Remember that distinction? The Jeane Kirkpatrick distinction, and so
right
in the Cold War, they explicitly said, look,
I'm relying on that distinction. That's my argument, was relying on that distinction.
So in the Cold War, we made that distinction explicit and said it's fine to do business with authoritarians. Well, now that we've declared authoritarianism the enemy, it'll be interesting to see how these people get around these various complications. I mean, why isn't Michael McFaul demanding that we end our relations with Saudi Arabia and with Egypt, like today? Is Ann Applebaum
I don't think the same
people. Why not? If not,
I don't think the people who are leading the anti-authoritarian, the anti-authoritarian movement would have problems with going against Saudi Arabia or the Philippines or any other authoritarian.
Well, why did they so rarely utter that sentence then? If they wouldn't have, why aren't they actively advocating it? I thought it was their whole crusade. I thought authoritarianism was the whole enemy. Why isn't Ann Applebaum out in front of the Saudi embassy protesting or something? How often does she really put her rhetorical energy behind ending relations with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, and with various other countries?
I'd call her coherent if you just ask her, should we stand up to the Saudis? And she said yes. You don't have to. Ann Applebaum is not Barry Weiss. They're not people who will temper their principles when Israel's involved. I mean, these are, I think they're two different groups of people.
Well, maybe she has made that a big cause. I could be wrong. I haven't noticed.
No, I just think, well, why do you have to make something a big cause? I mean, as long as it's a cause.
No, if you say the enemy is authoritarianism, you need to act like you mean that. You can't be selective, and just because you happen to have friends in Hungary or something, obsess over that. Do we really mean? Do you really want a global war on authoritarianism? Do you understand all that involves?
Well, I don't know. I think this is an argument that's made against me all the time, which is, why aren't I making just as much a fuss about something else that I don't like? And I say, well, I don't like it. You can only make a fuss about so many things at once.
No, but this is making a fuss over straightforward extensions of what they claim is their ideological obsession. And again, I don't know, Anna. I don't follow her that closely. Maybe she's the exception, but there's a ton of people who are talking this talk, including Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken. Okay, and they're not doing anything about Saudi Arabia or Egypt.
Well, it turns out they're not doing anything about Afghanistan either, so they're consistent.
Well, not, but look, I don't think those two guys favored this. I think this was a Biden show.
But no, Blinken Blinken, was on Biden's team in the Obama administration, and supposedly he bonded with him because they had similar views of foreign policy. And this has to be one of the views, that we should get the hell out of Afghanistan. I mean,
it could. I don't know.
So I don't think Blinken spent a minute, arguing that we have to stay because of humanitarian and feminist and anti-authoritarian concerns.
I do want to say, look, those concerns are not nothing. I do think it's interesting. First of all, a lot has changed since the Taliban. The Taliban hasn't run Afghanistan in 20 years. A lot has happened. Smartphones, stuff like that. And even the people in the Taliban themselves some of them are more cosmopolitan than they used to be. It'll be interesting to see, what happens. I think it's a good sign that they seem more concerned with their public image than they used to seem. A Taliban spokesman came on NPR and said, we will not interfere, something like this, I didn't hear the exact words, with the right of women to get an education. Well, that would be a very big difference. And
I have severe doubts about whether they'll actually do that. Well, the next wave of stories, I agree. Well, they'll be on the lookout for reprisals, and there'll also be a wave of stories about how, well, it's been 20 years. The Taliban are finding it's not so easy to impose their rule on a more cosmopolitan nation. So I look forward to those stories too. Biden's interview with Stephanopoulos. There are two things I think that are worth talking about.
Is that the one where he mentioned Taiwan?
I don't know. He said, one of the things is he said, there's a greater threat of terrorism to the United States from Syria than from Afghanistan. And that just struck out to me. What is the threat of terrorism against the United States from Syria?
Well, he probably has in mind groups that actually were, quote, on our side. I don't think we directly supplied weapons to these various al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria, but some of our, quote, allies did, and some of the weapons we supplied wound up in their hands.
Right, but is there any... Okay, so you're saying he's completely wrong, but is he...
No, I'm not saying he's completely wrong. I'm saying, Syria, we helped. We and our allies helped arm al-Qaeda affiliated groups in Syria. This is how screwed up our policy has been. It just makes no sense.
But I agree with that. But even so, is anybody launching a terrorist strike against the United States from Syria? I don't think so.
Well, nobody's launching them from anywhere outside. That's what I've said. That's what I've been saying. The only threat that has actually materialized is homegrown terrorism. And now it's not impossible that, I have no idea what things we're doing around the world to prevent terrorist attacks and various platforms. And I'm sure we were better off in this respect while still in Afghanistan. There's more uncertainty now. On the other hand, if the Taliban, if we can convince them, they did agree, for what that's worth, that they won't be a base to al-Qaeda. I don't know if it's worth anything, but I do think, there are forms of retaliation we can threaten that would make them think twice about this. But I also, I honestly don't know how big, even in principle, the threat is. It just can't be. What exactly is the asset that a country like Afghanistan provides to somebody plotting the next 9/11, right? It's not like you need a huge stretch of turf. It's not like you need a 700-acre training camp, right? It's like, what? I don't know. Maybe if they're thinking about them building a nuclear bomb or something, it's not clear to me.
Maybe remote work doesn't work for them any more than it's working for IBM.
It could be.
They have to have a campus. Where they can interact and spark off each other's ideas. But this is the Syria thing. You were supposed to react to that saying, oh, my God, Syria is not a terrorist threat to the United States. We've made it worse, and Biden is captive of the blob, and this quote proves it. That was my reaction.
Well, no, I'm not saying that Syria is this huge threat. I'm saying it is to say that, look, Afghanistan is no more of a threat than places like Syria are, I think is valid. That's not to say Syria is a huge threat. On the other hand, look, there are these anti-American groups that, thanks partly to our intervention, have more weapons than they had before.
Well, but that's the opposite of what Biden was saying. Biden was saying, look, we were ridiculous to stay in Afghanistan, which wasn't as big a threat as Syria. We have to stay in Syria because Syria is a threat. Oh. And you're saying Syria is making the threat worse, and I agree with that.
Is he saying Syria, the government, is the threat, or terrorist groups somewhere in Syria the threat?
He just said he said we should focus on intervening in Syria to protect the United States more than focus on Afghanistan.
I disagree there because remember, all of these groups in Syria that could conceivably pose a threat to us, the regime doesn't like. The regime will take care of them. Iran will take care of them. Okay?
That was my point.
Okay, fine. We are on the same page. I take it back.
Iran will take care of what?
Of these Sunni terrorist groups. You think Iran likes ISIS and Al-Qaeda? Let Iran and Syria handle that territory, and I assure you the number of terrorist groups that could conceivably pose a threat to the United States will decline.
I hadn't thought of that point. Good point.
I mean, this is how crazy our policy has been, Mickey. It makes no sense.
Do you think the only other thing I had to talk about, do you think the idea of, well, we're withdrawing, but we just want there to be a decent interval between our withdrawal and when it becomes obvious we've lost, do you think that argument, which was made in Vietnam and is now being made here with Afghanistan, has any merit at all? I would think there might be some evolutionary basis for saying, yes, it's quite rational to fight for a decent interval.
What you're asking me, would a decent interval be better than what happened?
Yes. Should we just throw this decent interval argument into the trash, or is there something to it?
I have an answer. It's probably not the one you were expecting in the affirmative, which is that, the hawks in the foreign policy establishment are, among their talking points now, are that because the collapse has been so calamitous and actually, again, hasn't been nearly as bad as it could have been in terms of actual dead people. Although, granted, again, the welfare of women is a big concern, and the welfare of those people who helps is a big concern. But anyway, the talking point is that because the humiliation has been so abject, our credibility is shot. Nobody fears us anymore. No allies think we'll stand by their side, which, when you think about it, just doesn't make sense. I mean, Afghanistan was a really peculiar case in a lot of ways. But that talking point, and I think some people want it to have this effect, that talking point could have the effect of making Biden talk tougher and act tougher. And one of the things he said, in fact, and I don't know if this was in the Stephanopoulos interview, but he kind of said, I mean, here's the quote: "We have kept every commitment." So he is replying to this talking point. "We made a sacred commitment to Article 5 that if in fact anyone were to invade or take action against our NATO allies, we would respond. Same with Japan, same with South Korea, same with Taiwan." Now, as was pointed out, this is a departure from the traditional American doctrine with respect to Taiwan of strategic ambiguity. We have not traditionally said we are committed to defending Taiwan, and so there was naturally press coverage of this, and this is one of the downsides of having a president who is probably at an age and stage of cognitive evolution where he should.
I thought he breached strategic ambiguity a while ago. Not just in this interview.
Well, maybe, but this I don't know that he did. I think. Well, but anyway, my concern is they're trying to intimidate him into being more hawkish. It's like did the humiliation of the Bay of Pigs make us more likely to get into Vietnam? Probably.
Well, that's if you remember when we the first Iraq War, when we won the first Iraq War, what were President George H.W. Bush's first words? The Vietnam syndrome is over. So we'd spent 20 years or so agonizing over the morale hit of Vietnam, and I just think I don't want to look forward to 20 years more agonizing over the morale hit of Afghanistan or the compensatory wars that are going to be launched to get rid of it. I agree with that. So I guess to the extent that humiliation is an independent factor from just losing, it's a bad thing.
I agree. What I hope is that our focus, look, our influence, it's not nothing, first of all. We have a lot of influence, and the IMF is currently withholding funds from the Taliban. We have economic leverage, and I fear that we will not use it wisely. But we have some influence. But let's face it, China has some, Pakistan has some, Russia has some. I just hope that when we assess the things that those countries are doing, we will continue to do what a lot of people are doing now: focus on the welfare of the Afghan people. If a relationship with China or Russia or whatever is accompanying what seems to be a kind of a productive evolution of the Taliban mindset, in other words, you're not killing a lot of people, they're letting women get educated, whatever, I say let it go. We should not view the influence of regional powers on Afghanistan as a threat per se.
I thought the non-interventionists wanted to focus on the interests of the United States. Now we're saying we have to care about the interests of the Afghans?
I'm saying that that's always something worth caring about. And I'm just saying, this is a case where I'm not saying anything that's advocating sacrificing American self-interest for their welfare. I think a sober, balanced, non-panicky view of what China and Russia does in the world is in America's self-interest inherently. In this case, it could also pay off by allowing us to focus on what's actually happening in Afghanistan and not freaking out over foreign influence there per se. And not expecting democracy to flourish overnight. That's not going to happen. The short-term goals are, women getting educated, people not being murdered and tortured in large numbers. We have to be realistic.
That's probably not going to happen overnight either.
Well, we'll see. I don't think it's impossible.
One way in which it hurts us is the Chinese looking to invade Vietnam are not thinking, we might looking to invade Taiwan. They're not thinking, oh, my God, we're up against the fearsome General Milley. We'll never win against General Milley and the Pentagon of the United States because they're so obviously brilliant. It has to have degraded our status around the world.
What, did he speak woke talk or what?
Well, now he understands what white rage is really about. Yeah, but
you think
no, because he's so obviously semi-competent. Because the whole Pentagon is so obviously semi-competent, and so these people are going to win the defense of Taiwan.
Meaning he's incompetent.
I don't know how incompetent he is. He's obviously not competent enough. He's not brilliant. That's for sure.
What's the evidence he's not? I honestly don't know that much about him, except that he understands he speaks a little bit of woke.
He really thinks it's a bad outcome, and he could see the outcome. He should have quit, right?
Wait, what did he say? Maybe he said something I'm not aware of.
I don't know. Either he was unaware of. He doesn't think that what happened was good. He's been going to great pains of saying, "Well, this wasn't told to me that this was a possibility." Well, then there's something horribly wrong with the Pentagon if it doesn't get the potential bad news to the top.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's a structural thing. I may have said this last time, but I've been listening to the best and the brightest, and Halberstam says something like, the military, before you're going to make an intervention, they'll give you all the warnings, the shit that could go wrong. But once they're in there, the problem is the opposite. They want to give you the good news. Yes, this is working. Yes, President Obama, this building up of a 300,000 strong force of Afghans is really a great thing, even though we're not going to give them the like keys to the maintenance equipment they need should we ever leave. I mean, there's a bias in favor of covering up the bad news, just an institutional bias.
You just made the case against Milley that maybe I didn't make. So there.
Well, he's doing what bureaucrats and generals have tended to do, which is they like to be able to, and human beings generally, which is they like to be able to tell their superiors they're succeeding.
Right, but he's at the top of the pyramid. The guy at the top of the pyramid should know that he's being fed bullshit and to take measures to get around the bullshit, the most famous of which, according to the Charlie Peters Washington Monthly Gospel, was FDR relying on the in-person reports of his wife's alleged lover, Lorena Hickok, about what was actually happening in the country, which were apparently very good. So, and there was supposed to be a back channel in the State Department to let employees get around this problem. And obviously all that doesn't work because it happened again. And if you're looking at Taiwan, you're thinking, well, these generals don't know even how to run their operation, so there we can beat them just like the Vietnamese did.
That can work both ways. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it.
What's the other way that it works?
Well, these guys are so incompetent. They could overreact and attack us if we mess with Taiwan. These guys they could press the nuclear button. It's like Nixon's crazy man theory, right? Make them think we're a little crazy. Well, maybe I'm not advocating incompetency on game theoretical grounds, but it could help.
Good point. Okay. Well, that's all the foreign policy I had to talk about today.
I mean, we're not out, I mean, there's a lot to be, look, we still got tens of thousands of people who helped us, who are in Afghanistan. They're not out. This is going to be an unfolding story for a long time, but it concerns me that the predisposition of the media seems to be to turn this into a bad story.
Isn't it more concerning what it says about Biden? I mean, Biden obviously buys a bunch of bullshit. He bought the bullshit about how this would happen slowly. He had more time. He had, the Taliban wouldn't take over immediately. Just the ways he's buying. I don't know if he's even quite buying the bullshit on the border about how, well, the border's under control. These people, it's a seasonal problem. It'll go away in the summer. Well, it hasn't gone away into the summer. And bizarrely, this is a transition, if you'll let me do that. There are rumors that Biden is actually about to reinstitute, to do a little bit of an about face, which everybody's been waiting for, this bleeding sore, waiting for him to change the policy. He might reinstitute Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, if he can, which was very important in terms of keeping the flood of refugees down or asylum seekers down. And that would be a huge deal. That would be, the left would go berserk, for one thing. I don't think he has the balls to do it. But there was a report in Vice magazine, allegedly based on 3 sources.
Is this with asylum cases?
Yes. In other words, you come seeking asylum and you can prosecute your case, but the key loophole is they get in the country while their case is pending, which means they never leave. And this would say, no, you have to wait out your case pending in Mexico, meaning you don't get to take advantage of that key loophole. And once that happens, the flow stops because people aren't coming to prosecute asylum cases. They're coming to get into the country. Once they don't get into the country, then it all dries up. The other big component was we actually threatened Mexico with tariffs, so they would take measures at their southern border to stop the flow. And those are the 2 key planks of what eventually worked for Trump. Anyway, if Biden, maybe there's the crazy theory that Biden is he's going to actually turn half Trumpy, maybe even more Trumpier than Trump.
Well, I think he's got it in him in the sense that, he's I mean, he's in touch with the traditional base of the previous base of the Democratic Party, you know, the white working class. And he's probably got a little populism in him and I guess a little economic nationalist in him.
Right.
He has shown signs of this all along, I think.
A few little signs here and there. This refugee thing we were talking about was one of them. But on the border, he's totally let the left take over.
But it's been clear all along. To me, it seems it's been pretty clear that his heart wasn't in any wokeism he felt he had to speak from time to time.
It doesn't matter if he's a doddering old man who feels he has to enact wokeist policies. Who cares if his heart's in it?
Well, the doddering old man problem is maybe one thing we could discuss in the Parrot Room. It's
certainly the Kamala problem has become more intense now.
Okay, I'm writing down Parrot Room topics because we're at an hour 15 right now. Kamala, we talk about in the Parrot Room. Coming up next. What else?
I have, there, not a hell of a lot.
I got some things.
I have one point to make about J.D. Vance.
Can't get enough of that.
There is Epstein. There is. John Ellis had a long interview with somebody about the case against Ghislaine Maxwell, but it's a podcast, and I haven't listened to it. I'm not going to have time to listen to it before the Parrot Room, I don't think.
Okay, well, that sounds like it's
2 weeks out. There's Twitter instituting its system where readers can flag misinformation on their own.
And what happens?
I don't know, but it's hard to believe anything good will happen. We have, I could talk about why I hate topic A, which are the two topics we've talked about.
Wait, topic A?
Topic A, I hate talking about topic A being Afghanistan and the virus. I like talking about little topics like the new Jeopardy host who had to quit almost immediately because of some things he said that were allegedly, they were sexist, but how big were they? There's Larry Elder. There was some scandal about Larry Elder that just came out. How dispositive will that be? There's is the Atlantic really prospering?
I hope you have the answers to all these questions because you only get into the Parrot Room if you're if you go to patreon.com/Parrot Room and become a patron. And if all these people do this, Mickey, and you don't have all the answers to these questions, there's going to be a mass exodus. There's going to be a rebellion.
Are you familiar with the Texan Nanci Griffith?
The reason, the backstory there is you and I both know a Nanci Griffith who is not this one, but this one was the singer who died.
That's Nanci Griffin.
Oh, that's Nanci Griffin. I guess I don't know her as well as I thought. She's your friend, basically, but I've met her. Yeah. But you mean the singer who died?
Yes.
Yeah, Nanci.
Right.
Yes, the one who sang From a Distance before Bette Midler and yet didn't become famous for it.
Okay, well, you know a little bit. Anyway, I can talk about what I know about her, which is not that much. But she was really good.
Nanci Griffith. Okay, here's a couple of things we can talk about. One of the Parrot Room commenters asked us, was I think a little distraught to learn that neither of us drinks. We're both teetotalers, and they want to know why. They want to know the story. We're going to reveal, at least I'm willing to tell my story. Yours, I know, is full of tragedy, sorrow, and mayhem. You may want to keep
heartbreak
it under the
and
wraps.
Hope. Yeah, I know.
But I think we can get it out of you.
Well, that's a little sexier than the ones I talked about.
And also a little more about the Weinstein brothers. We'll save it for the end for you Weinstein phobes. I've watched, I can say a little about the show Ted Lasso. Have you seen that show? It's Apple TV Plus's big hit, Ted Lasso.
What does it have to do with the Weinsteins?
Nothing. It's a separate item. I've got it.
Well, if it doesn't have to do with the Weinsteins, I don't want to hear it.
Why talk about it at all? Maybe I can come up with a Jeffrey Epstein angle. So that's a bunch of stuff we will mostly get to. We also have a public service announcement. Next week, we may we may tape and post on Thursday. That's possible. So be alert. Right?
Right.
And it's possible we'll do like regular podcast Thursday. Parrot Room won't come out until the following day or something. Various things are possible, but be alert.
Also, Tucker Carlson had a show on UFOs.
Oh, yeah. He's pro UFO. He's pro openness to UFOs. And did you watch it?
I did not. I read a summary of it, but okay, we can talk about that some other time.
Maybe. I don't want to overpromise.
Right.
But all this is available at patreon.com/parrotroom.
I don't think we've overpromised.
Well, we've mentioned a lot of things. I mean, you're going to get to the bottom of the Atlantic's financial situation.
But the only sexy one was, why aren't we drunks?
Yeah,
that might not be.
I think we should spend time on that. Maybe I'll tell a harrowing story or two. I have a harrowing story about.
I think we may have heard that harrowing story before.
No, that's different. That was a different drug. See, folks, this is how wild the Parrot Room is. Could be any number of drugs. Happens to be alcohol this week. Next week, Quien Sabe.
The one where you got so drunk that you were like in the dumpster and they poured the trash on you?
Mickey's making this up. It was the real story is much more harrowing than that.
Okay. Fair enough. I did make that up.
Okay. And
I think that happened to a friend of mine.
Oh, smash the like button. Sorry, I started yelling about foreign policy. Mickey just trolls me every week, and I always fall for it. And I'm sick of it. I'm not going to do it again.
That's the key virtue. You didn't lose control, Bob.
I didn't?
No, we like it when you lose control, but you kept control.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay.
Next week, Hope Springs Eternal.
So smash the like button, rate and review The Right Show, read kausfiles, the newsletter that makes up for what it lacks in frequency with quality. Is that your motto?
Brevity.
With brevity.
We're going for brevity or non-existence.
True, it doesn't come out often, but it's very short when it does. So, yeah.
I've maintained a meaningful silence for a month at least.
Yeah. No, it's not. That's the other thing. We can talk about what you should write next. I'm going to write that down. In the Parrot Room, we're gonna prepare your next story. What
I should write?
Yeah.
Okay. I need some inspiration.
I am it.
Always.
Okay. So on to the Parrot Room.
Okay.
See folks there.